Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. Got a great show for you today. Sat down with Felipe Rezende, the head of Flow Paragliders. I've had a lot of requests for him. He's down in Australia, down in the Sydney zone, and making some pretty wicked wings. The XC Racer has been a fun one to watch this season. They're END. They've got a CCC glider coming out and another C glider coming out. Interesting to talk to a designer and somebody that starts a company in this crazy world of paragliding. And the biggest question was just why? How can you make a move in such a saturated market? But they're doing it. So we get into his history and which is super fascinating with his surf background and windsurfing background and kite surfing background. So obviously a lot of parallels there. He learned to fly in the Sertão, which I can't even imagine in Brazil. Like most people go down there after they've gotten pretty good to fly in that kind of wind. Was down there about a year ago. So great show there. Before we get fully into it, a couple pieces of housekeeping. Hugh Miller and Ed Ewing reached out to me recently. Many of you have probably heard about the tragedy in Indonesia with the tsunami and the earthquake and tsunami there that took out 7 pilots, 7 of our feathered friends over there. And there is a fundraiser for them. So the Cloud-Based Foundation, you can find the link for it at Cloud-Based Foundation or on Cross Country's website, Cross Country Magazine website, or in the show notes for this one. I'll have it up on the website as well. But they're trying to raise $60,000. I saw Ozone jumped in there with $15,000. I think they're up around 30, just to raise some money for their families. So major tragedy. If you can help out there, those folks would really appreciate it. Next, I thought I'd tell a little story about today. Some people really enjoyed the story from a little while back about, my mistake of not flying with an inReach that didn't lead to anything. It was just one of those kind of like silly things. Good reminder. And I had another one today. Those of you who've been listening to it the last few episodes, we've been talking a lot about flow and some of these concepts. Another one that I've been thinking of a lot for decades, really, actually. Many of you maybe have heard the story about I used to be really into whitewater kayaking and was doing a lot of first descents back in the day and running a lot of really hard creeks and really steep stuff and big waterfalls and that kind of thing. And spent a bunch of time down in Mexico and Guatemala one year, and I was paddling with a guy named Teo Berman, who went on to be a big Red Bull kayaker, and I think he's now retired, but he was really at the top of his game for quite a while. Anyway, we were, I won't go into the whole story because maybe some of you have heard it, but I got pinned in a waterfall, and it was pretty outstandingly scary and really should have died. I was underwater for more than 5 minutes. And anyway, won't get into all of that. But right before that happened, and for days and days and days before it, I'd had this like really prominent voice in my head that was just screaming at me to it was the whole trip. We were down there for a few months, and from the day I left Colorado, I was living in Colorado at that time, and the day I left, it was just like, you're not coming home from this trip. They're not coming home from this trip every day. And it was spooky. It was really scary. I'd never had anything like that. And I had just assumed at that time that it was, like because I hadn't been paddling a lot, I'd been working really hard that summer to make money to go on this trip. And so I was kind of off my game and I wasn't really tuned in. And so I just thought it was a matter of just, getting the time and getting the practice and training and, and I'd get there. But right when we got into it, we were running really hard stuff and really high consequence stuff. And this voice was just screaming at me. So anyway, a couple months later, I get pinned in this waterfall, and this all happens. And when I came out of it, this voice had one final thing to say to me. I have no idea where their voice was coming from. I'm not a religious person, so it's, it was, but anyway, that's what happened. And the voice came back and said, well, I hope from now on you're going to listen to me. I haven't really had that ever since then. And of course I kind of made a contract with that voice that said, yeah, you bet. And I've been thinking a lot about the difference between, I think we've all had it, those kind of funny feelings when you head up to launch And, you might have a vision in your head that's really not so nice, maybe not finding your reserve, or, imagining splatting on a rock, or, all the various things that make us a little nervous before we take off. That I think are, pretty natural. I've always tried to really listen to that, to try to decipher, is this my gut trying to tell me something, or is this just, the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other? On the one side, it's just natural to kind of think some bad thoughts, and hopefully you can brush them away and, conquer it with good thoughts. And, hey, I've done the training. It's a good day. This is just that little stuff I need to push to the side and get after it, versus, a proper gut feeling that is trying to, get your attention. And I don't have an answer for you. I don't know how to decipher between the two. Maybe some of you that listen to this are intrigued by this or have your own experience with this. I'm sure many of you have. Reach out to me. Let me know what you think. But I had one today that was pretty interesting. I'm training pretty hard right now for the X-Alps, have been for a while, and today was supposed to be a big vertical day with a couple flights down and then more vertical. And the first one up was about 3,000 feet, and that was all fine. When I got out of the car, I was surprised at how windy it was. It was not a very nice day, but and I thought, okay, well, I'll just walk down. It's not going to be flyable, but I always have my gear because I should be hiking with it anyway. And it's a hill right outside my house, one I do a million times. And on the way up, it was pretty gusty and pretty swirly and not very nice. But then as I got to the top, it was pretty, it was not recreational flying by any means, but it was, it seemed pretty doable. The angle wasn't great, but it was kind of blowing down the valley, so it was a little bit cross from where the launch is. But I thought, I need to do this. It's good training. I need to do as much of this kind of weird stuff as possible, as long as it's safe. And so I unpacked and got all harnessed up and ready to go. And there was just this very kind of unsettling, something's not right here. So I stopped and I waited for probably 15 minutes to just watch the weather and watch the clouds. And it was kind of dumping out over the pass about 20 miles up the range from where I was, and that looked a little concerning, but it was kind of like, you could feel it. Most of the time it was okay, and then sometimes it was blowing really pretty hard. And it's fall here, it's cold. These weren't really thermal cycles. These were just, little gusts coming down the valley. So, I definitely knew it was going to be spicy, but I thought I could just get off this ridge, fly out over the valley, and, get down real fast, land at the car, and go to the next place and do another hike. And anyway, sat there for about 15 minutes and kind of tried one more time, and then put the wing back down and listened to that gut thing again. And because this time it was a little bit louder, and I was like, there's no point here. This just doesn't, something's wrong. Something doesn't feel right. I can definitely fly in this weather, but something's not right here. And so I packed up, I took it over the other side of the hill where it was kind of out of the wind more, and packed up and started walking down. And not 90 seconds later, so I would have totally been in the air, and started blowing probably close to 50 and so in miles an hour, and really swirly, super dicey. Probably survivable, but would have been really scary and not a lot of fun and pretty risky. So just interesting. I think that they, listen to your gut and try to learn how to decipher between those just little things that you can shake off and not have to listen to. They're just distractions, and something real, because sometimes your gut knows. Interesting. Hope you find it interesting. Let's have this talk with Felipe. It was I've had a lot of requests for him, and it's pretty cool that he's grinding out some space in this very crowded space and making pretty interesting gliders. And it was interesting to talk to him and get his take on how that all happened and how his history led into it, and thoughts on where paragliding may or may not be going. And there's a lot here. I think you're going to enjoy this. So without further delay, enjoy this conversation with Felipe Rezende, the head man at Flow Paragliders. Felipe, awesome to have you on the Mayhem, man. I'm glad we made this work. It's been almost a year since I was flying with you down in Bright at the World Cup, and some of your wings were getting a lot of attention. That was pretty exciting, and I remember our talk very vividly. I got to tell you, I'm a little bit gun shy on the podcast. I think your mind works at a whole nother level, and so we'll get into flow and we'll get into why you've become a paragliding designer. But I thought as a good kind of introduction to you and to the listeners so they get to know you a little bit, why don't we start with a story, just your most memorable flight, your most something that still brings you a lot of smiles. It could be maybe the scariest flight, just the one that kind of first pops into your mind.
Hi, guys. Pleasure to be here with you. I think one of the most memorable flights I had was when I decided not to follow roads anymore in Manila. And that was my first 200K flight. There was a point in the flight where I was either just not following roads anymore and committing to a line really deep into the boonies, and that paid off. And that was my first ever 200K flight, landing at sunset. That was an incredible moment. And that was like a page turner, because after that, every flight I didn't look to fly on following roads anymore. That made a whole different open up a whole different world for me for actually flying.
That's a great lesson, isn't it? I've never flown Manila, but I flew Deniliquin. Let's see, when was this? I was training for the 2015 race, and I came down to visit Bruce in Deniliquin. I guess it was that December, so it would have been December 2014, I guess, and did a couple weeks of flatlands there. And I remember Sebastian Benz was there, and he'd been there quite a bit. He's made a real that's almost kind of his winter spot. And I remember. I don't remember how it came up in the conversation, but he was like, you want to know the trick for flying down here? You can't even think about the roads. You gotta fly the sky, which is super committing. I don't know what Manila's like, but down there in Deniliquin, which I'm sure you've flown, it's like, sometimes the skies line up pretty well with the roads, but when they don't, that's some pretty serious terrain when it comes to the heat. There are no trees out there.
Manila can be similar if you get the easterly flows when you fly further west.
Yeah,
there's a spot there that you can either just go following the roads towards Muri, or you just keep on going west, and it's really big farms and just not many roads, and if you land early, it's just a big walkout because, and
that walking in that, I guess Manila is also pretty hot, but down in Deniliquin, that could be kind of life-threatening, I thought. If you landed in the middle of the day and you had to walk for hours, the better call would be to try to find something it was, some kind of tree and just wait till night and then walk. But it was, every once in a while I come across these dried out watering holes, and there'd be like 20 dead kangaroo. I was like, man, these guys are built for this. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a perfect tie. Before we started recording, you were saying, I didn't know that I knew you grew up in Brazil, but I didn't know that you learned to fly in the Sertão. So let's talk about that. Talk about Tori. Talk about how you got into all this absurdity.
Yeah, sure. I was born in Brazil and then moved to Australia 15 years ago. But my first flights I had in the most challenging place in Brazil, and one of the most challenging places in the world, because when I first started, I started flying on the coast, and then I realized that some of the hang gliders were flying land, and I was like, wow, what's going on there? They can actually catch thermals and fly distance, and I went to check out. But the main reason why other paragliders didn't go inland was because it was too windy. But I didn't care. I just went with them, and
with the hangies.
And then I came with the hangies. Yeah, I actually flew hangies for 2 years, and then had a big crash and became a bit intimidated by hang gliders. And I always felt more comfortable with a paraglider. So I just stuck to paragliding.
Give me a year here, and how old were you?
was probably my early 20s, like 20, 21. Yeah.
And what year was that?
Like, that was it was after it's been a year in the States. I was 21 when I came back. 21, 22. So the year between 1999 and the year 2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And how did you discover flying? Did you discover it there in Natal in Brazil on the coast, or you said you discovered it in San Diego.
Yeah, exactly. So I was living in Natal and I just wanted to go traveling a bit. So I went traveling and spent I think about 9 months in San Diego, and I was a really keen surfer at that time, surfing most afternoons at Black's Beach and looking up to Torrey Pines and seeing all these paragliders flying. And at one moment I remember like just mesmerizing, just watching the paragliders flying and not catching many waves. I was like, oh, what's going on? And just got, like this really strong attraction to the flying world kind of thing. And that's the first thing I did when I went back to Brazil was to, I knew a friend who was a hang glider, and he also paraglider, and he taught me how to fly because there was no schools, there was no instructors in Natal. And that's how I got in touch with paragliders. And he knew, I think, some of the soul guys who were chasing world records. He told me about it, so I went there to check out what those guys were doing. And I was like, oh, wow, what is going on here? The guys waking up, before sunlight and driving up the hill and flying this 50K hour winds. And I was like, wow. Those guys eventually became really good friends, and they taught me some good lessons. And I did my first exceed flights from Plateau and Tacima. Remember a moment I had a ENA glider and get blown over the back flying in the afternoons because I never really took off in the mornings like they did. So I was.
Is that because it's just too windy, or why weren't you taking off?
Yeah, it was just I was too windy, and it was another level. It was really the first year when I because they were there for like a month, Yeah. They were pretty hardcore in the early days. They were breaking barriers, trying to experiment, like taking off earlier and earlier in the day. But I recall that the winds were super strong, and I was at that time flying an ENA glider. My glider just couldn't have the penetration that the comp gliders that they were flying had back then. And then the gliders they were flying, it was scary. It was super snaky, Yeah, comp gliders, open class gliders. I had an experience of getting blown over the back and the glider all over the place. So can you imagine like the rotor from Plateau?
No, I can't imagine learning there. I mean, we were saying, before we started recording, I took my first trip down to the Sertão last year and cut my teeth in Tacima, which is just, God, that place is really tough. I have so much respect for Ralph and those guys for making that work. I think Rafael was saying that they'd put in like 37 days for 3 flights. It's just such an impossible waiting game because the forecasts seem to be useless. And then, your first move is that you take that little 3K bench back to the cliff wall, and then you got to get 40K over that plateau. And it's howling. And it's so windy, and the day is not on by any means yet. And, such a hard start. And then, 10 days, I got one really good flight out of there. And I felt like I was pretty lucky, but I saw a lot more good flights from Plateau, but I never did get to fly there, but I heard it was really intense, often kind of cross. And I mean, kind of like Kishida, like a lot of wind, and you gotta be on
a lot of wind. Yeah. Especially like early in the mornings, when the cloud base is low and it's windy and climbs are broken, really verticalizing. You're just drifting with bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's full on.
I have a huge respect of these guys. You know, like they still go there. They're still there right now, chasing world records. It's
Yeah.
pretty impressive.
It is
That's well,
impressive.
that moment, that memory I have, it's like from 15 years ago. Frank Brown and these guys. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. That wasn't my game. I was over it pretty quick. I was like, man, I just
Yeah.
Dillon was the same way. I mean, I'm always surprised that those guys go back over and over again because I mean, it's just you're sitting in the tow paddock and it's so hot and the flies
Yeah.
and then
Exactly.
if you pull one off, it's fantastic. But then you've got this insanely long drive home, and I mean, I just
Yeah.
I
It's
don't
like
know. I like mountains.
it's like running a marathon, right?
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it
There's
is.
all the preparation behind it and all that. Yeah.
It really is. And it's really just about it really is about the patience game, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously those guys have a lot of talent and there's talents involved, but it really seems like it's just hooking into the right day and
Yeah.
getting off the hill at the right time and making it work. And they've proven that team flying they're doing is amazing.
Yeah.
We were lucky to fly with Donizete this summer in Chelan and stuff, and he is a good pilot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that the team flying thing because I got I don't know, when Seoul had a team, I was part of that team and I flew XC with those guys. And I was so impressed with the way they flew because if one of them got a better line and got advantage of height, that person would spiral down and fly back to us to stay in the same level and fly as a group, as a team. And that opened up my eyes. Was like, wow, this is what team flying is all about, communicating and sometimes you two different thermals and just like, oh yeah, 2.5 year or 1.5 year. And then they join the better thermal and that makes flying so much more efficient and exciting because
Yeah.
you're not alone, you're kind of by yourself.
I think that's the
Although,
key, and we haven't really figured that out here. We're really trying. We learned a lot from Donizete this summer because we had one day in Chelan where they canceled the day, and it was actually a pretty good day. It was just pretty windy at launch, and they made the right call. It was kind of dicey, but a few of
yeah,
us got away, and he was quite a ways out in front of me at the start. I was never able to pick him up because they were flying pretty fast, and but the two guys flying with him, Mitch Riley. And who else was with them? Matt Hensey, somebody else, but they really learned a lot. But that's kind of new to us. We fly
yeah,
independently, and especially on those
yeah,
big
yeah,
days. You just you're always just like and then you lose it.
yeah,
But they've
yeah,
proven that
yeah,
it's just so much more efficient. And, it's
yeah,
such a better way to click off miles and kilometers because you're at some point in the day you're going to have a low save, and if you got three guys there doing it, you're going to get out.
yeah,
You're going to pull it
exactly,
off.
yes. Yeah. And Donizetti has his amazing sticks and he's really has big balls, because he's committing to sometimes some these long glides and flying low, and he most of the time he pulls it off and gets a climb. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
that was the thing that
yeah,
really impressed me about that. That's also why I can't believe you learn there. It's intense. It's not like you're just flying over sand. I mean, the Sertao is really
yeah,
serious terrain. I mean, and with that
it
much
is.
wind, there were a lot of times where it was like, man, I really need a climb here. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, yeah. At that time when I got exposed to actually flying, I was a really keen surfer, and I had just gone back. I just had a year and a half off where uh, I spent 6 months in Hawaii, and I was a keen surfer, looking at the forecast for big waves, and sometimes chasing big waves and stuff, and there was a complete different um, like surfers, you really in touch with nature and you're challenged by the elements um, and it's not every surfer that's attracted by big wave surfing and looking for the swells, and then all of a sudden I got exposed to paragliders, which are in a completely different environment. They're flying, but it's almost the same kind of approach, the same kind of interaction with nature. You've been challenged by the elements, and you have sometimes this magic day that you look at the forecast, and the forecast is coming, and you have to be ready. You wake up early in the morning before sunlight, and exactly the same as what the surfers do. It's just in a completely different element. Instead of being water, you're in the air. And that was fascinating for me. I just wanted to explore more, and it's been, and now it's my life, and I don't even surf as much as I used to anymore, and I don't chase big swells anymore. But I'm still always looking at the forecast for the good day to go XC flying. You know what I mean?
Do you think, Philippe, do you think there's much, I know exactly what I mean, because I spent a lot of time in the ocean and kiting and surfing, and I've always been more of a surfer than a kiter, but tell me about how that has maybe influenced you being a pilot. Those years you spent windsurfing and surfing and kind of interacting with water, because I've always had a theory that all the years I spent sailing and kiting was really really helped me understand flying, but it's kind of hard to communicate. I don't,
Yeah,
it's one of those things where I kind of feel, but I don't know how to. Have you ever thought about that? I'm sure you have.
Yes, I think, I don't know. I don't know if I can explain putting words into words, but I think it's to understand that like each day is different, and to adapt to that day, and be in tune with nature and tuning into the day. I think the more experience you get into flying, you kind of it's a natural skill that you acquire, I guess. But I think predicting a good day, it's an art itself. Some pilots are really good into looking at forecasts and different models and what to do for the day, and that's another art itself, right? To look at forecasts. But to fly the conditions they're presented to you, it's one of those things that I don't know if it's related, it came from surfing or not, but I just trying to make the most of the day. Gavin, sorry, maybe I got lost a little bit there.
No. It's a really tricky question, because it's a tricky thing to even talk about, and I think this is going to perfectly segue down the line. I don't want to yet, but into flow and not only the state of flow, but your company flow, and I'm sure that there's some parallels there. But before we get there,
so there's something I wanted to say.
Okay.
So about XC flying, we have a group here around Sydney that the pilots that we always fly together. Andy, Che, these guys, we always organized weekends away and flew together. And I was well known to either have my radio off all the time or not talk as much, because I always felt that on XC flights, especially on those mellow days where the climbs are not so strong, just nice cruisy days, you fly into sunset in the middle of summer, I felt that I almost went into this state of, I can say maybe state of flow, where time is not relevant, and you're just in the groove. You're just connecting climbs after climbs after climbs, and you completely immersed in this environment of flying, and you just, it's a strange feeling, but it's like you're almost in a trance kind of a mode, and and I felt that sometimes I'm on the radio talking too much, relying my position to the retriever driver. I don't get into that mode. And I really like to be in that mode sometimes, just drifting with the wind and be on that flow state, if you can say that. And connecting. Sometimes I remember one year I was flying with Che, and Che, every climb he found a call. He was just on it, on it. And at that year I wasn't. And that happens from time to time, and I feel that I'm really switched on, and I find the climbs and the calls straight away. But some years I'm not there, and I can't explain why.
God, I'd like to ask you more about that because I think everybody listening would like to know why. But
Yeah.
I think for those of us who spend a lot of time flying XC, we're all just nodding our heads right now, going, "Yep, yeah." Sometimes that's like that, I mean,
Yeah.
even Kriegel, I had him on the show, and he was talking about that he often really has a hard time climbing. He's the best pilot in the world. It's just
Yeah.
sometimes you have it and you're sitting on top of everybody, and sometimes you're like, "Why can't I do this?"
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Sometimes you're super confident and we're going to get the next one and you get it. And it's like that confidence that brings you, you pull over every climb, but sometimes it just doesn't work for you.
So, Felipe, before we started recording, you were talking about that, a big part of your, paragliding design came from a place that I didn't really initially draw the conclusion. I didn't really get it. You said it came from your history with shaping boards. So let's talk about that. How did that all start, and how did you get from there to paragliding?
Okay, so I grew up in Natal, and since I was little, I surf, and it's from me. It's a deep inside of me that I always be interested to creating things, designing things, making things. So when I don't know, when I'm late teens, early 20s, I just started making surfboards as a hobby in my dad's backyard. And then when I moved to Australia, I already knew how to design and how to shape boards and glass boards. So I got a job pretty quickly with one of the biggest Australian shapers. Where I am here, there's a big surfboard industry. And down the track, I had the chance to open my own workshop, making flow surfboards, which were very successful for about 8 years. From there onwards, surfboards became. I was in a crossroads between going bigger or going somewhere else, and then I decided to go somewhere else because of the fumes and the resin attacking me as my health. So I decided to go and go back to architecture and design kites. So flow surfboards no longer exist. I still make boards for friends. I just designed them in the computer and I get someone to glass them. And today we just have the kites, flow kite boarding. Still a fascinating company. So it's very low key. We make one kite, which is a all-terrain kite, yeah.
How does shaping boards and kind of going through that whole process, and I hats off to you for getting out of it because of the health side. I know I've been involved in that a little bit myself. That stuff's brutal. I ran boats for a long time, and dealing with fiberglass is pretty toxic stuff. But how did you? And by the way, I had no idea that. I always thought flow paragliders was like either Chick Sent Me High's flow state or flow, like airflow through the air. So that's kind of cool to know that it actually came from waves and from water. But yeah, how do you think that kind of experience and that kind of background and shaping lent to your understanding of design and design of paragliders?
Yeah, I think it's all about fluids, water, air. It's just a different density. And making surfboards gave me this amazing opportunity to make 10 different prototypes a week. That's what I was doing. It was pretty much doing custom-made boards. So every week I would make 10 different boards. So I had a really deep understanding about what small changes would create in the water, and that gave me a visual picture what like a fluid dynamics really do through an airfoil, or how a wing would behave in the air. And before I design a glider, I try to visualize, trying to picture how it would fly, how would all these little how it would work. You know what I mean? And there's another let's say chapter in my life where I got exposed to the fluid dynamics a little. I used to in my early teenage years, I used to be a swimmer, and we used to put underwater cameras to analyze our stroke and how it could make the all water entry more efficient by analyzing in slow motion our stroke under the water, and then I felt in my own skin how those little changes would affect to make it more efficient. I think like this combination of experiences I had in life led me to design the gliders I do today, I guess. A little with the study of architecture as well, and the interaction I had with all the other professionals. Had some friends that work in the aviation industry, some friends that work with engineering. Sometimes I need to work together with them. For example, when I designed the X-Racer in the section of the glider where they have 4 or 5 unsupported cells, and I wanted to know how to place the diagonals properly so they can share the load, and it acts the same way as in a bridge. And those guys gave me very important insights how to do it properly.
Fascinating.
So when I design the gliders, it's the main concept is it's me, but I have a lot of people behind me that help me. So when I don't understand about a topic, I search and I ask for proper skills, proper people to give me knowledge I need to. Yeah, that interaction is very important.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So still back then, you were flying then. You were into flying, and at that point.
Yeah, I was. Surfing was always my biggest passion, and flying was more like a weekend hobby. I was flying when the conditions were good.
And was the kiting just kind of an obvious, was that just an adjunct from your years growing up windsurfing? Was it just like, because most, a lot of windsurfers just crossed over into kiting because it was a natural, it's like the ski snowboarding thing. But was that what it was for you as well? Or was it more of this kind of, because surf, did surf lead you to kites, or did windsurfing lead you to kites?
It was kind of the same. I think I started surfing first, and then because Tao, it was always so windy that surfing wasn't great, but it was amazing for windsurfing. Okay. And after that trip to Maui, where I got exposed to a lot of windsurfing to the highest level, hanging out with all the pros and my heroes. I came back even more keener windsurfer, but it was during that time where a lot of people were shifting from windsurfing to kite surfing, and I was left alone just windsurfing by myself, and I resisted until there was no point to windsurf anymore. So and then I learned to kite surf, and then a new sport again, and all the fascination began. So when I decided to start making surfboards, I wanted to do something new, and then I decided to just design kites. Because my neighbor was designing kites, and I was helping him to tweak, to test prototypes, and introduced me to the...
Were these inflatables or foils?
All inflatable kites, okay. So then I started making my own protos, and at the same time playing with the with the software that design paragliders as well. I don't know if the time frame is a little bit confusing, but everything was happening all at the same time. During that time, I was competing internationally in PWCs. At that time, my paragliding flying, I became a better pilot, and I was sponsored by SO and was part of the SO team, and I had a really good understanding about competition flying, and was part of the team. I don't know, in direct contact with the SO designer, giving feedback about the Tracer series.
So this is kind of we're kind of mid 2000s now then?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, mid 2000s,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah, mid 2000s.
And give the listener a little background here on what it takes, and then the obvious question is, why in the world would you want to get into this business?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I had this strong fascination. It was making surfboards was easy. It's complex. It's a complex design, full of curves, and but then I realized that I was making good boards, and then the next big challenge was designing kites, and all of a sudden I was designing kites that people were happy with. But then the paragliders were something. They were way more complex, and I was a little bit reluctant at first to embark on that journey to design paragliders. But at the same time, there was this strong fascination where one of those things, I just couldn't live life without doing it. I just had to try it. And my wife, one day, and she asked me, like, "Oh, what do you see yourself doing?" And I was like, I didn't want to say to her because it sounded so far away. But the only thing that I could think of was to design paragliders. She asked me the same question again, maybe a couple of weeks after, and then I said, "Look, the only thing I can see is to design paragliders." And then she looked in my eyes and she was like, "That's what you're going to do." During that time, I learned how to use this software properly and had a few prototypes. So I got together with a couple of the guys, and we decided to start. At first, we decided to make little mini wings to fly here on the coast on strong winds, and that was a big challenge because those conditions are pretty full on at times. The wind can be, you know what it's like flying strong winds. You need a wing that's collapse resistant, and so we worked a lot on the right tensioning and the right airfoils. A lot of people ask me how I came to become like a paraglider designer. I think you don't all of a sudden becomes, you have a set of skills that you can then design a paraglider. I think your experiences in life leads to then to have the experience enough to design a paraglider. I think that's what happened to me, because I had my years of making surfboards and then the exposure to design kites, and then my background as an architect, working with all the CAD-based softwares and things like that. And if you want to design something, you do your research first. You learn everything about that project before you actually start the design phase. So, and that what happens with me in paragliding. If I want to design a new glide, I do all my research. I learn a lot. I try to learn as much as I can for that specific project. For example, let's say the D-class glider, the XC Racer. I did a lot of research before I could start the first, drawing the first line.
So when this software, so let's just take the XC Racer as a first example. When you with the software, how much can you do there before you got to build a wing? I mean, can you do so much there that you can be like, okay, this thing's going to get X glide ratio and it's going to weigh this much? And I mean, I'm just clueless. Can you give us a brief broad stroke of that? And then what are the costs involved, to bring something like that to market?
Yeah, okay. The software is basically the designer's pencil. It just aids your It's just software to help you to design. It doesn't do any predictions, it doesn't do any simulations. It's just that for you to design it. I think in the early days of paragliding, people used to design paragliders by hand, right? Now we have a 3D software that you design in 3D, and it's super, as a pro designer, it makes life it's so easy. And the software I use, it makes life easy because what you see is what you get. There are all the softwares there that you have to make a few prototypes to get what you want. So
okay,
when
so
I design,
your software is unique to you. You know, Ozone, Nivic, they've all got their own software, or some of them using the same that others do.
no, I think the one I use is the one that's mostly widely used right now. It's called the Surf Plan. It's made by an Australian designer. I mean, this guy is incredibly smart, and he makes the software that's in industry standard now. I think most other manufacturers use his software.
Okay.
And it's you pay the subscription per year, and it's not cheap. So that's the first cost. It's you have to pay for the software, and then you have to pay for the prototypes, and then after the prototypes you have to pay for certification. Certification can be really expensive if you, let's say, just cost. If you want to design four gliders, the cost is something around $100,000. Yeah, so there's a bit of investment there for you to start.
Was that a big part of? Did you guys kind of was the cart before the wheel in a sense? Did you just start designing and then worry about the money, or were you able to convince some investors that you were the one to get behind, and then how does that all work? And you don't have to answer that. But I'm just curious.
It was in the beginning. It was just as a project. It was just something fun. I started alone in the beginning, and then I changed it to my friends, and more people jumped aboard. But in the beginning, it was just something that was a challenge. I just want to do it and see if I could make design paragliders, and all of a sudden the mini wings were really good, and then I made like a XC glider, like an NC type of glider that I had a few flights that were as good as any other certified wings, the same type of specifications out there, and they were super safe. I could push really hard, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, I can actually design gliders, and the gliders are actually good. So, and then that's when the idea of making something commercially became, and then we started to get serious and so, okay, let's do this. Let's make a project. We didn't rush things. We were very low key for the first 3-4 years, just to make sure. We could have released the ENC glider much earlier, but I just thought that there were a few things that I wanted to learn, to explore before we could go. Let's say worldwide, because we were offering the gliders, especially the Yachty, the mini wing, the strong winds in Australia for the first 3 years, and then since December last year, we decided to go. Let's certify all these gliders that we have, and then go global, and and I've been doing this full time since December last year, because before it was not really. I had to, have my day job to pay for the prototypes and all that. But so it's a real thing now, and it's being I'd say successful. We're receiving a lot of feedback. The XC Racer has been doing really well internationally in competitions, and feedback from all the gliders has been really good too. So
we went through this period, after Ozone, kind of created the Shark Nose in 2009, and there was the kind of open class I don't know, you want to call it debacle or whatever. I mean, it was just, it's been a really interesting for a few years. And, the manufacturers that were making competition gliders were trimmed down to really, ozone, gin, Nivic. And I've heard really interesting arguments on both sides of this, that on the one hand, statistics say that, you guys as companies making wings, your focus needs to be the ENBs, because that's the most wing that's sold. I mean, in order to make money, you want to sell lots and lots of the Bs, because that's the bigger market, right? But the argument has been that, for those companies that are really playing serious ball at the competition, and that technology passes down through. But then you've got this other argument that, but Skywalk and Nova and UP, and they're all doing okay. And they don't, well, actually UP does now, but they didn't for a long time, play in that kind of market, because the competition end is, it's very difficult or impossible. And correct me if I'm not saying anything right. This is just what I hear. I'm not at your end of the thing, so I don't understand this playing field nearly as well as you do. But because it's hard to make money at the competition end. So I've heard that, that it's, on the one hand, it's because, people like Luc Armand just love playing in that, that end of the sandbox. But on the other end, it also passes down through your Ds and Cs and Bs and As and your school gliders. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think you're right. The high-end gliders, there's a lot of breakthroughs there in terms of technology, and it definitely passes down to the lower-end class gliders. In terms of performance that you can get from those, like let's say the B gliders, there's a lot of things that we've learned from the XC Racer that we now use on the other gliders. Like any other company do. We're trying to, so because I think the XC Race is the one that we're trying to, it's all about, there's no compromise really. It's all about performance, and then the little things we learned from that project we're trying to use on the other gliders as well. And the way, I think I have a really good eye to see things that maybe someone that's not a designer can see. And being a paraglider myself and being involved in competitions, I think the desire to go and design wings is because I was like, why they don't do that? Why they don't do this? And I was trying to kind of, I was wondering why designers, they don't use some solutions that I could clearly see right there on my face, just flying, looking at other gliders. And that's one of the main reasons why I decided to design my own gliders, because I believe that I could do, and I could use things that I could see in my own gliders. You know what I mean? And because I have the flexibility to explore my ideas and put into practice, I did. I had a really good one of my really good friends from university. He used to be deeply involved. I mean, he works for Embraer, which was one of the biggest airplane manufacturers in the world. I think it's the third behind Boeing and Airbus now. And we kind of we back in Brazil, we paraglided a lot together, and I was involved in with he had this little project that he designed remote control airplanes, and he played a lot with the thickness of the airfoil of the wings, and that's what I explored a lot on my designs. I explore thickness, airfoil thickness, and maybe, I don't know if you can see on my designs, maybe the thickness of my airfoils are slightly different from the other manufacturers. And I try to observe, like in nature, what soaring birds do when they're trying to stay airborne. Like if you see, for example, eagles, they have a very, very straight linear edge. sometimes even the wingtips further forward. And then when you see paragliders, they have all this the sweep back wingtips, which the most most paragliders are designed that way. But on the XC Racer, trying to explore
sweeping them forward.
Yeah. So you align the airflow to the chord wise, and have the tips better aligned to the airflow, and
so how
like
long
that.
does it take?
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
There's a challenge there because of the tensioning and everything else, but
How long does it take to go from concept? So you guys released the XC Racer, and that it's been widely well received. People enjoy it. You're probably getting a ton of feedback. When would the XC Racer 2 come out typically? I mean, and you try to speak generally, or the next. I'm not super familiar with your full line of wings, but your next B. But what does it take from kind of concept to certified and out the door? Is that 2 years, 3 years, 1 year? How long does that take?
It depends of the project. Let's say that's a year. It's a good time frame to develop a glider. What slows things down for us a lot is the waiting for new prototypes. So we waited a new prototype, and we have to wait for roughly a month to receive it, and that slows it down a lot. So because sometimes, let's say we get one prototype and we test, oh no, let's make a new one, and then we have to wait another month, and then let's make a new changes, and then that's 3 months gone if you want to have 3 prototypes. So that's what slows us down. For example, the XC Racer was a year and a half project because we just I just wanted to explore to make a 2-liner and see how it would fly, and the first one was already incredible. It was flying incredibly well. Handling everything, performance was good. So then I started to experience a few other with some other things that I wanted to explore. And for example, I started playing with thickness, airfoil thickness. The performance was incredible, but the handling wasn't there. So there's sometimes compromises you have to take, and to find the right balance to have a package that's good if without compromises in handling or performance. Because when you design a glider, for example, I could make the XC Racer more performant the way it is now, but the handling wouldn't be that great. So I had to readjust the design to make the handling fun and nice, and the pilot could enjoy as well. You know what I mean? So we are right now working on the ENC glider and the CCC glider, and those 2 projects we are using a lot of things that we've learned from the XC Racer. Yeah.
And when can we expect the CCC?
The CCC. So hopefully we have it for the next Australian comps in January. So we've got 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So because the project already started before the European summer, I had one of the protos, the PwC in Bulgaria, and I was flying that one there, and I was super happy with the performance. As you know, like Bulgaria can be sometimes super rough, lee side, the takeoff, and the thermals can be strong. And the glider was super solid. I could push full bar all the time. And there was a task where I finished in 3rd. There was another task I finished in 6th overall in the PwC. So I thought, the performance is good. I think the climbability and the glide at full speed is really good, really good.
How do you approach selling gliders? Typically folks like yourself that are really good at design, engineering, that kind of thing. It's kind of hard to cover the whole spectrum. I don't know, how big your team is there now, but how do you, because there's very different philosophies on that. Do you try to get them in the hands of the best pilots? Do you have do you have a team? Is there a flow team now? Is there, how are you approaching selling? I'd like to tie that in too with, what's it like being an Australian company, because it's an expensive country. Are you
Yeah.
manufacturing there? I'm assuming you're manufacturing over in China or Vietnam or something.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. So I've learned a lot from making boards and making and design and making kites. That if you have something good, the product will sell itself. People will naturally be drawn to your product if they are good. So that's why I decided. I told the guys, hey, let's take it easy on this. Let's make gliders that are awesome. And people will come to us. It's not us knocking on people's doors. Say, hey, we have this gliders. We're going to sell it for us. And that's exactly what happened. We made gliders that were good, and so people came to us, and that's the best scenario. And this is our mojo. This is what we wanted to do. We want to make gliders that are good, and people will fly it, test it, and it's like, oh wow, and tell their friends, and things like that. Because I had with the kites, I don't know too many people in the industry, and we sell the kites, but we don't sell the volumes I was hoped for, because just the context we don't have. But so all the flow paragliders are all designed and tested in Australia. We have a team of pilots here in Sydney, and we have a little office. We have someone that works in the office with us, and we have a worker full time. We use a factory in Thailand, and we have someone there only in charge of our production in Thailand that can supervise, and then the stock is ours. It's held in Thailand, so that person takes care of shipping and all that as well. And it makes it easy for the logistics side of things, so we don't need to hold any stock in Australia. We just save with shipping. And now, these days, we have dealers in most countries in the world. I think the XC Racer created a lot of attention to our gliders. But the A glider, the B glider, and the tandem, and the mini wing, also be getting lots of positive feedback from pilots, from dealers, from schools. So, and for the future, we have the C glider, the triple C glider, and also a high B glider that we should release early next season.
And are you the main designer for the whole lineup?
Yeah,
Okay.
I am. Yeah, I am the guy who designs all the gliders, but we work with other pilots. And what I like the most is to give. I'm the first person to fly the prototypes, tweak it, and then I give to pilots. That's what I like the most. I give to our test pilots with fly the gliders and tweak and help me tweaking it. And but I like to give to normal pilots. Pilots who are supposed to fly these gliders. And some people, they're like, oh, but I don't know how to give feedback. So it doesn't matter. Just fly. Just see what you think. Some people, they say sometimes just small little things. That's super valuable feedback to us. And we're trying to listen to the pilots, what they want, what they need, and how they like it should fly and all that. Yeah.
When I haven't been in the game nearly as long as you, but in my kind of version of the paragliding history, kind of like post 2000, a good friend of mine, I'll shift gears here a little bit. A good friend of mine, Bill Belcourt, when we asked him, when we were filming 500 Miles to Nowhere, we asked him, like, where where are gliders going? What's the future of paraglide? What do they look like? And he kind of laughed and he thought, I just can't predict this anymore because, in the pre-Shark Nose days, a 100-mile flight was a really big deal. And then, Shark Nose came along and it just doubled, overnight we went twice as far, and it was a major breakthrough. And he's been in the game since the 80s. So, he's seen them just improve and improve and improve. And it's just amazing, two liners and the whole thing. But really since 2009, the improvements, the wings have, they keep getting safer and they keep getting better and they keep gliding better, but it's, I would call it incremental, right? Really since Shark Nose, they've been pretty incremental improvements. And, we're seeing the single surface stuff. And I just saw somebody sent me a video a couple of days ago. I don't remember the Dudek. And now they have like a hybrid. It's like single surface / regular foil. So people are doing some kind of interesting things, but, if you could rub your, maybe you already have something in mind and you can't say it, but what do you see happening with our sport? Because it's also this interesting double-edged sword that it's, the gliders are getting better, but the safety really isn't. In other words, they're getting safer, but we're still having all the accidents because we can fly them in more wind, so, is there going to be, what do you guys sit around and talk about on Friday night when you've had a couple beers and, and start, imagining the 2030, the gliders of 2030?
Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe in the future, to get a leaping performance, the way I see it will be new materials, maybe invention of new materials, like the big leaping performance from the two liners. I think was due to less drag, right? And the way you can fly a two liner. Also, it was a double winner there. And maybe the performance from now onwards will be incremental little things that can make a difference. Maybe in climb, maybe someone can come up with solutions in climb, because if you climb with eagles, they out climb us all the time, right? So maybe there's an area that people can explore and make the gliders to climb better than what they are, climb like the eagles. I don't know. Imagine one day we out climb eagles. I don't know if it's possible or not. Yeah.
That would be exciting.
So that's why I start playing with airfoil thickness, because I believe that we could maybe make a glider that could climb better. And that's the feedback we get from the people flying the XC racer. They think that the glider climbs really well.
A buddy of mine just sent me literally right before we got on the phone, so I haven't had any time to look into this. But do you know, or have you seen RASP? This RASP technology?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Yes. It's interesting. It's a technology is very similar to what you see in foil kites, the Ram Air foil kites.
Yeah.
So the Ram Air foil kites have a valve that's almost the same, but it's on the leading edge right there, the air valves, the intakes, because what you want to do with it is, if you drop the kite in the water, you still have a bit of air inside that you can relaunch. But the way I see it, maybe you don't need it. The glider can recover from collapses without having that rest.
Yeah,
in my own designs, I wouldn't bother to put that.
Okay.
I think I don't need it, because now the gliders are so collapse resistant, and then when they collapse, they recover so easily as well. Even the END gliders. They recover almost instantaneously if you know what you're doing. If you put a little bit of brake on the open side, it just boom reopens.
Yeah, I spoke about this a little bit in the last podcast with those guys down in Argentina, and I felt like it was probably worth exploring a little bit more. But I was in Macedonia at the end of August at the Nordic Open, and they just had this really tragic accident that you were there. I know you know about it.
I was there.
Yeah, and with the midair, and Goran, the meet director, was really stressing, how to behave, how to fly in a gaggle, as in this comp right after that terrible accident. And he also brought up, which was great. I really liked that he emphasized that, because I think it's often unemphasized, and it's a point in the race where people are stressed and they're flying too aggressively, and it just doesn't, you just don't need to jockey that hard at that time. So it was great that he was saying that, especially in a comp that's not a World Cup, when you got people on different rated gliders and, different climb rates and the whole thing. He made a point of, back in the day, and by saying, by back in the day, when the first, kind of shark nose gliders came out, and there was, the accidents in Peter Heaton and stuff. I mean, the blow ups were pretty extreme because the glide speeds were so high, and and you're right, you just don't see it anymore. You just don't see gliders blowing up. We really have to kind of switch, adjust to where we have to pay attention to things, I think.
Yeah, good point. That's a good point, because I used to go to competitions like PWCs, for example. There were competitions that would have 1 or 2 reserve deployments a day. Now we go to competitions and we don't see reserve deployments anymore. Yeah.
It's much more rare, which is great. I mean, you still see them, but it's often not because of that, because people going into bad places or whatever. But it's not.
Exactly.
You don't see as much the full bar going into goal and just exploding.
Which
is great.
Yeah. So what do you think as a pilot, like not having your a designer point of view? What do you think about rest? Do you think it's something necessary for a glider to have?
Literally, I was being very literal there. He sent me a little Facebook thing as I was calling you, and so there was a video. I had never even heard of it. I'm very familiar with what you're talking about with foil kites, because my background in kite surfing. But he showed me a video. It was just a girl kind of cruising along a cliff, and she had a really super benign frontal. But I mean, most of the glider went, and it didn't look like she had to do anything, and it just kind of popped back open. And so it was just an 8-second video. So I had, I can't tell what, but it was my thought. He sent me the video and he said, "What do you think of this?" And I thought, wow, that's a really nice recovery. It's beautiful. The wing had that in it, I guess. And so I guess what he said was that it was, they're meant to still frontal, but, like you said, your analogy was perfect with the foil kites, but it just kind of blocks it at that point, and then it just pops back open. So, I was curious from your side of things what you thought of that, because it was,
maybe for beginner gliders, maybe for ENA gliders or big gliders, that could be interesting to use it.
Yeah, it could be interesting. And I think also too that, I know because, you're making gliders for the full range, you're flying, 3-liners, but I don't, I fly 2-liners. And so, I'm pretty out of touch with that side of things. When I do, I've been flying the Climber quite a bit the last year and a half for bivy and stuff, and it's a 3-liner. And the first thing I noticed when I got on it was like, wow, it frontals. Like I just hadn't, you don't experience that on 2-liners anymore. At least if you're not. I always think if you do if you're not flying well, but if you're on it, you shouldn't have a frontal. And so it's
exactly.
So that might be a really good thing to put into like B gliders, because it's they're way more prone to frontaling to begin with, but also it's, if you can make them more benign, then you have less chance of a pilot over managing it, which is what they usually do at that level. They're just way too hands-on.
It's interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's interesting you saying that the C gliders or the big gliders they prone to frontal easier than the 2-liners. We actually can design A gliders or B gliders or C gliders. They are as collapse resistant as a 2-line. Wow. But it's just due to the fact of how certification is that we can't we have to make,
Of course. Yeah,
especially for the sea glider. I had this beautiful sea glider that I had to change just to fit in certification to make the leading edge a little bit softer. And yeah, which is a shame. We should look into how the certification is, because it doesn't really reflect. It's restricting designers to design gliders which are safer. So
interesting. So that's a great next question. So there was a lot of hubbub about the CCC class, but from at least from my perspective, it seems like it's kind of working, because there's companies like yours back in the game, and that's what it was designed to do, was to allow RFC gliders in World Cups. And it seemed like in other words, it seems like it's getting companies back into it. So just on that on that level alone, it seems like it's kind of working. But if you could wave your magic wand about certification, what would you change?
I would one simple solution. I would make it certification so you can allow to use collapsed lines in C class gliders or B class gliders. So you can mimic the collapses in real life. Because the way it is, if you want to design a glider the same way you design a two-liner on a C class glider, on a B class glider, there will be too much load on the A lines. It will be really hard to pull a collapse. And when you pull the collapse is really because you pull it doesn't collapse as a collapse. And then the collapses is too drastic. It's too much. And then the recovery is like, it doesn't fit into the certification standards. And it's a fail. And sometimes they can't even collapse. If you go full bar and you're trying to pull a full frontal, the glider doesn't want to collapse unless you have collapsed lines that will pull from the very front of the leading edge.
Let's clarify there, because I think a lot of listeners will have lost you. You're talking about the little lines that you see on two-liners that you literally tie lines to in testing so you can actually get it to go.
Yes,
right.
Because if you look at a two-liner, the A lines, where the A lines are anchored on the glider, they're not close to the leading edge. They are further back. Mm-hmm. But also, how you place your center of mass, your center of gravity, or your toe point in relation to your canopy. So you distributing the load of the lines more on the A lines. The A lines are bearing most of the load of the pilot. So there's a lot of tension on the A lines there, and the glider is super solid. That's why you can push a lot of bar on the D glider or the triple C gliders, and the glider doesn't collapse. And you have this awesome feedback from the B, which is kind of soft in a way. And you can kind of design a glider which will resemble that kind of feeling on the C class or on the B class, but we can't, because if you do that, we won't be able to pull the same collapses that are required for certification unless we change the certification.
Interesting. Yeah, well, good luck with that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
but we can dream, right? We could dream.
Yeah, but you can still design beautiful gliders to fit certification these days, and that's okay. We can get our head around it, and make beautiful gliders still. Yeah.
one more question, and then I want to ask you one final one about bringing you way back to the very, very beginning. But what gives you hope as a designer, and kind of a fledgling, still? I mean, I know you've been at it for a few years now, but you're still small and growing, and hoping it's all going to go great for you. But what gives you hope when you look at paragliding as a sport, as an endeavor, as an adventure, because the statistics don't look great for you guys, in terms of just the growth of the sport and, the age, the lack of young people getting into it. And, I might be a little skewed here because I'm looking at the US, but I think you guys are pretty similar in Australia.
Yeah.
What do you
Pretty
think?
small.
What do you guys think about that? I mean, as a person who's written a few business plans, that's always something that that goes into the beginning. This is a high growth sport. Well, that's not really the case.
Yeah, that's interesting you're talking, because I really just recently we've been chatting about in our Australian squad, the discussion group, about how can we broadcast the competition. So imagine if you can broadcast the competition and offer that to TV channels, or to make it so the broad public can watch. So we'll be talking about using drones, some sort of drone. So I think maybe that's the future, and then will become more attractive to companies or TV channels to give us more exposure, and then attract more people that way. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? Like, imagine if you have drones following us and broadcasting live a competition. That would have been amazing.
That would be cool. I just noticed, a lot of the new kind of POV action cameras, like Garmin's new Verb, which is basically the same package as a GoPro. They're very similar size and weight. You can just broadcast to YouTube or Facebook, as you're flying, so imagine if you had 20 pilots, in a comp that were doing that. I mean, it'd be better if it was running through some kind of some amazing editor who could actually, so it wouldn't just be all, that'd be chaos to watch 20 people's head cams. But if you could, if you could edit it, if you could take that stuff and edit it, that would be, that'd be pretty insane. I went live very briefly in the last X Alps. I was, amazing day. I wouldn't normally do this in that race, but I was flying literally right over the Glossglockner, very famous big mountain in the Alps,
I know
and
that one.
going from the south to the north, going up to the Aschau Turnpoint. It was just on. It was a perfect day, and the cloud base was high, and the days had been really terrible. So I was pretty excited, and I was kind of looking down at my instruments, and there's this beautiful cloud street out in front of me, and somebody pinged me, and I went on Facebook and just turned it on the live thing for it was a few minutes. And man, it was so exciting because, at first there's a few people, and then there's just, you could see the numbers, and people commenting, and I wasn't typing. Amazing. I could just say stuff and they could hear me, and so then like, where are you? I'm flying over the Glasgow. It was really cool. I mean, so you're right. I mean, I think that's always been the hope of the film stuff I've been doing, is just like, I think very few people understand really what we're doing. And, if they could, then it would be, it's pretty exciting. But
if you can show to people what we do, I think more people will be interested to be tempted to give it a go.
Yeah. You got to. It's always hard to break over that, the safety side of things too. There's just there's still too many accidents.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but Dave Snowden, and he's been deeply involved with the Olympic side of things, the paragliding Olympic side of things, and his big hope is that one day paragliding becomes an Olympic sport.
Yeah,
and he truly believes that it's possible. The next Olympic Games after Japan, I think it's in France, and he said, Annecy would be a perfect venue.
Oh man, can you imagine? Holy cow, that'd be so exciting. Yeah, that'd be terrific. Well, hey, I want to be, Philippe, I want to be mindful of your time. It's super fascinating talk. You mentioned something right in the very beginning. We could either go back to that. You mentioned you got hurt pretty bad or you had an accident or something in hang gliding. Feel free to share that one if you want, if you think it'd be instructive. Otherwise, if it's just another accident story that's dismal, we don't have to go there. But I do want to rewind to your one of the questions I love asking is, if you could go back to your 50-hour self, what would you change? And I think that's really relevant with you because if I've got my timeline correct, when you were 50 hours, you were flying Patu and Tassima, which is just mind-boggling to me. That's insane. So I'd love to just take everybody back there briefly. It's hard for folks that haven't been there to understand it, but I'd love to get your viewpoint because you must have learned some pretty hard lessons right in the beginning if that's where you were learning.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson was not to step up to a new glider too soon. That's what happened to me in hang gliding. I stepped up to a double surface hang glider too soon and never felt really in control, and then crashed because of that. In paragliding, I had a completely different approach. It took me a long time to jump from an A glider to a B glider. So don't rush. Natural progression. Wait for your time, and when you feel that's right, step up to a new class. You can still have fun on the B glider. Yeah, and you don't really need to get a high-end glider to fly 200 kilometers.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. One we hear a lot, and I think people often make that jump too early. It was my best story about that was last year at the Monarca, which is getting close. It's coming up in January. I'm pretty excited about that. But Marco beat everybody on a C. He was flying the Queen, and because it's Valle can be pretty rough, and the conversions can be really strong, and those of us that were flying CCC gliders just couldn't stay on bar, and he just would drill right past us on final glide, day after day.
That's classic.
I mean, he's a great pilot, so I got to give him credit there, but. He's a fantastic pilot, but that feels really good when you're standing on the podium at the end and you're on a C,
wow,
so you can absolutely do it.
Getting all the triple C, exactly.
Pretty cool. But well, Felipe, thanks so much, man. I wish you and your company the most success. It's fantastic. It was great flying with you last year. I hope we get to do that again here soon. Good luck with the upcoming comps and your release of the C and the CCC glider. I'm sure everybody's excited about that. And man, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Gav. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that. A lot to learn there. That was a pretty fun conversation. If you're getting something out of the Cloud-Based Mayhem, ask that you treat it kind of like a magazine subscription or something that you value. I have talked about this many times in the past. We're not funding this through advertising because I think that that's a contract that I want to avoid, and it takes away from a lot of the authenticity, and it's just annoying listening to ads at the top of the show. I know how that's how podcasts do it, but advertising is not free. There's a side there that I don't really agree with, and I think there's a lot in advertising. Look at Facebook and all these others that are there's a cost there. We don't need to totally get into it, but only contribute if you can, and if it's not pinching into any other parts of your life, because there are many other ways you can support it. You can certainly support it financially. You can do that through cloudbasedmayhem.com. You'll see the links to do that there. We now accept crypto, which is kind of cool. But you can do a one-time support through PayPal, or you can become a subscriber through Patreon and be rewarded for doing so. You'll find those links again on the website. But you can also do many other things that are not financial. You can share it with your friends. You can blog about it. You can post it on social media. You can share it when I put it out there. You can talk about it on the way up to launch. What this is all about is just sharing the love, sharing the stories, trying to make us all safer, better pilots. And I hope that it does that for you. See you on the next show. Thanks a lot.